Hey, it's Jeff with DaringDino.com. In this video, you will learn how to create a nighttime city aerial scene in Blender. I'll cover how to make a very simple city, add streetlights, and finally create a real city with real buildings and roads with streetlights. So let's get into it right now. The first thing I'm going to do is show you the main concept by making a very simple scene. So to do this, I'm going to first Shift A, add a plane, scale it up a little bit, go into Tab, Edit Mode, hit W, subdivide, and subdivide it just twice. Then I'm going to hit X and delete only the faces. And then I'm going to switch out of edit mode with Tab, Alt C to convert it to a curve. Go into the curve settings over here, make it full and turn the depth up just a little bit to right about there. And then I'm going to convert it back to a mesh. I'm going to set up a particle system, and the number, I only need about 100 here. I'm going to make the end at 1, and that'll just make them all appear right away. And let's leave all this alone for now. And then let's go down to physics and say no physics. And we don't want to render the emitter. And then we're going to render an object instead of a particle. So let's switch to layer 2 by hitting 2 on our keyboard. Shift A, add a icosphere, and we want this to be really low poly, so let's turn the subdivisions down to 1, scale it on Z, S, Z, and then 0.2. And then let's give this a quick material. Let's make a new one and make it an emission shader. And let's make the color orange-ish and set the strength up to about 10. Let's switch back to layer 1, click on this object here, and we'll call this streets. And this is our particle. And then let's also add a ground plane in here, make it a little bit bigger. Move our streets up just a little bit, and let's name this ground, just so that we can keep track of what is what. All right, for our street particle system, let's scroll down, and the object we want to use is our particle object. And then let's add a camera really quickly and switch to it with 0. I'm going to use Shift F and move it around with the WASD keys. This is really cool if you've never tried it out before. That looks fine. And let's preview what that's going to look like. Yeah, that's looking pretty much exactly how we want it to look. So I'm going to add in a quick building with Shift A, add a cube. Let's just scale that down. Shift D to duplicate it and move it on X. And then I'll do that again and move them on Y. And let's just get these in place here and preview it again. And yeah, that's looking pretty much exactly how this effect works. That's the basics of how to do this. So wouldn't it be really cool if we could make a convincing city by using some real data? Well, it turns out there is a way to do that. So let's delete everything in this first layer. Well, we can keep the camera, I guess. And let's use this add-on called Blender GIS. So I'll bring up my user preferences here. And here it is, Blender GIS. So this is a tool that lets us bring in real world data into Blender. It is awesome. There are links down below on how to download it and how to set it up. All you really need to do after you install it is to set a cache folder here, and that's just so that it has a place to put some images while you're using it. All right, so now how to actually get something cool. So switch to top view mode, and let's set our base map, and I'll use OpenStreetMap, and that should be fine. There we go. Click OK, and then let's zoom in using our scroll wheel, and then I want to place my cursor here kind of where I want it to load data. So I'm going to let it load New York, because New York has a lot of interesting streets and buildings. It's a great place to use this add-on. And I'm just going to zoom into Manhattan. Looks like I'm a little bit off. And it does take a little bit of time to load these maps, but it does a pretty good job of doing it. All right, so I'm going to zoom in a lot closer than what I would do for an actual scene, just because I want this to load pretty quickly. All right, so once I've got kind of that area I want done, I'll hit escape, and then I'll hit get OSM. And I want building and highway, and you just use shift to select multiple items here. And then you click OK, and it will take a couple of seconds to grab this data. So I'll be back as soon as it's done loading. Okay, so it loaded in a bunch of data here, and you can see we've got some cool looking buildings, and they're interestingly shaped. And we've also got some roads. These roads are just edges. So what I want to do is Alt-C to convert them to a curve. And then I want to give them some depth here. And you'll probably need to go a lot higher than you did before, because this add-on brings things in real world scale. So you can see we're in kilometers over here. And then let's make sure this is on full, just so that we've got more data there. And the reason we're doing this is so that we can emit particles. You can only emit them from vertices or faces. And we don't want just vertices, because that would look weird. It'll only use the intersections. So that's why we're doing this. And then Alt-C to convert it back to a mesh. And these are our roads. So this is what we're going to use for our particle system. And if I scroll up here, make a new one, we want the n to be 1. We want no physics, and we don't want to render the emitter. We just want an object, and we're going to use that particle that we created on layer 2, which is this guy, this icosphere that's kind of flat. All right, cool. So let's switch back to layer 1, and you might need to adjust your camera to, well, you're gonna need to adjust it in a bunch of ways. First thing I'm gonna do is move it up. So let's make sure I've got it here. I don't even know where my camera is. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, there it is. It's way off in the middle of nowhere, I think. Yeah, let's put it back where it needs to go. Man, where is this thing? That's so bizarre. Okay, there we go. Now we're getting closer. Okay, so the other thing I'll have to do is, let's actually scale this camera way up. Sometimes using numbers are easier. There we go, now we can actually see it. So I'm going to just make sure that I can actually see stuff with this camera. So, all right, so you can see I'm not seeing anything with this camera. So I have to go into the clipping end, and I'll just make this 100 kilometers. And now I can see stuff with this camera, and I'm using Shift F to kind of place it a little bit better, which this tool is really nice for doing this kind of stuff. And I'll just do something like that. And then I'll move the roads up a little bit, and I'm doing that just so that the street lights are at kind of a street light height. So I'm just using G and Z to move them up just a little bit. And then I'm also going to add a plane, scale it up by 100 with S, and then 100, and then I'll do S10 just to give me enough data there. Make sure it's not doing anything crazy. Yeah, that looks good. All right, so this should be emitting our particles, but we will definitely need to pump up the number of particles it's using. And I'm actually using jittered here because it makes the lights more spaced evenly instead of being completely random. So let's just do a quick preview here. And it doesn't seem like it's working the right way. Actually, what it is I need to change the size of the particle to be 1. There we go. Now I can start to see those lights coming in, and I actually probably want to make them even bigger than that, so let's do 2. There we go. And you can see there's simply not enough lights in here. I'm also going to make them a little bit bigger than that. Let's go 4. There we go. And then let's make the number of particles 10 times that. So just add a 0 at the end. There we go. And now I can start to see all these particles kind of coming in here. And now it looks like I made them a little bit too big and they're too bright for sure. So let's make them back down to 2. And that looks right. For this scene, I don't need quite that many. So let's divide it by 2. And one quick tip is you can use math right in the number field here. So I'm just doing divided by 2, and it gives me 5,000. That's looking pretty good. So to tweak this, I'm going to add a mesh light above the scene. So to do that, I'm just going to duplicate the ground. I'll just grab the ground, which I did not rename yet. There we go. Just duplicate it and move it up on the Z-axis so that it's above our camera. I'm going to call this Sky Light Pollution. And I'll just give that a new, not a new particle system. I want to give it a material and just call this Sky Fill. Give it an emission. Give the color this nice orange color and set the strength down to like 0.1. That might be even too strong. Yeah, that's still too strong. So let's make it 0.05. That should be probably still a little bit too much, but that's okay. You can kind of see what's happening here. And then I should also make one for the buildings, and I'm just going to do a really quick gray material there. I'm just going to copy that down here. And then the ground, I should make something, I'll just do like a dark brown, so it's a little bit different. And based on that, I probably want to make my sky fill a little bit brighter, so I'll do 0.2. Here we go. That's looking pretty good. And this ground I'm going to make a lot brighter and less saturated. There we go. Yeah, so this is looking pretty interesting. The last thing I'm going to do is go into my node for the particle, and I'm going to give it a random color, which I made a full tutorial on how to do that. There will be a link in the top right corner. So let's do input object info, and then we'll do converter color ramp. And I'm going to copy this color by hovering over it and hit Command C and paste it down here with Command V. And then I'm going to go to this flag and paste it again and just do a slightly brighter, more yellowish color. And I'm going to use random as the factor and color into the color here. And then if I see what that looks like, now my lights are slightly different colors, which is pretty cool. And then in the render nodes, I'm going to say use nodes, and I'm going to add a filter glare, and I'm going to change it into fog glow. And these settings should get you pretty close. What this is going to do is make the lights seem more realistic, which you can definitely see that in the final result. So that's it. I hope you learned a lot about creating a nighttime aerial city scene in Blender. When you create a render with this method, feel free to let me know on Twitter at daring_dino or in the comments section below. Don't forget, if you want to get free resources and great tutorials like this straight into your inbox, sign up for the Daring Dino newsletter at daringdino.com/newsletter and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.